What's up, jerks?
Manning retired.
Which one?
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. Tausch Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.
What's up, internets? It's the Fantasy Nerds again. We're back. The Doc, he's still letting us come back and record this fantasy show for you guys because I know he proclaims himself as a fantasy expert, but I know that he really isn't that good.
Are you kidding me? Or is that how you're going to start off this podcast? You're not going to give me any credit for last week. In 2 leagues, technically I didn't draft them, but I have managed them. In 2 leagues, I am, one league I'm 5-4, and the other I'm 6-3. So you can't sit here and make fun of me. I'm doing great, and I'm poised to make a strong playoff push in both leagues.
I will give you credit for being extremely lucky. Because I know you texted me on Sunday, you're like, dude, Delaney Walker, I'm the fantasy guru.
Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a humble brag in that the only reason why I picked him up was because I looked for a tight end because my tight ends were on a bye, and he was the number 1 guy projected to get 6 points. And it said, okay, D. Walker, Tennessee, number 1 guy. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. It was a throwaway. There was no analysis involved. But when he goes for 20 points, you look like a genius. And he had a great game. And both leagues last week, I got over 120 points. And when you make some moves and everyone delivers, it's just there's nothing better than when you have a roster full of players on your fantasy team that get over 10 points. It just looks so nice. It's so fun.
You look like a genius, but it was more of a throw a dart at the wall and hope for the best. I would like to take a little bit of credit on mine. In the Beat the Boss League on Detroit Sports 105.1, my wide receivers were on bye. I had DeAndre Hopkins on bye, who's been a beast this year. So being a 14-team league, there really wasn't a whole lot out there, and I had a gut feeling. There were other receivers out there, but I said, Corey Brown from Carolina, you got what it takes to be on my team. And he gave me a touchdown, and I won last week, which propels me to 7 or 8-1, I think. And I'm still number 1 in that league, and it's awesome. But there's a lot of player news to get to. There's a lot of injuries. But we're gonna start this off kind of talking about my main league, the Slackjaw League. It's trade deadline week. And unfortunately, my brother and Chris, they aren't here. Chris hasn't been here for forever, but he's got better stuff to do. I know. He has better stuff to do, apparently. And my brother, I think he's going to a concert tonight. hey, you have your priorities.
That's all good.
Yeah, and it's trade deadline week, and the entire year, there hasn't been a ton of trades, and I don't know, Doc, in your leagues, are there lots of trades throughout the season, or is it pretty much people like you who throw out bad trades and trades just don't happen?
In our league, no. People have made moves. Adam and I pulled off a blockbuster, and I'm really happy in terms of finally making a trade and seeing the guys that I put in my lineup actually play well. I picked up Dez Bryant and I picked up Bennett from Chicago. Both had decent fantasy numbers last week, and it helped me to a victory. I gave up Marshawn Lynch. Some people say, well, why would you give up a running back? But I really am starting to believe that this is a passing league. If you can get guys that are prime wide receivers, then you take advantage. And I got now 2 that I think I can roll with the rest of the way in Allen Hurns and Dez Bryant, pairing Hurns with Blake Bortles week in and week out. And I think I might be onto something. But in our league, the question marks that come up is there's 2 couples in that league, myself and my wife, and Adam and his wife. So whenever a trade is pulled off, people start looking funny, like, is there collusion? Is something going on? So I'll give you a quick trade that Adam just made this week with his wife. And I'll get a review. He made a trade with his wife. It got accepted. He traded Martavis Bryant and C.J. Spiller, and in return, he got back James Starks and Michael Floyd from Arizona. Do I need to raise an alert on that?
What was the first? Who did he?
He gave up Martavis Bryant. His wife is 1-8. He's on top of the league with, I think, 7 wins. So I think he's either 7-2 or 8-1. But he gave up Martavis Bryant and C.J. Spiller to his wife, in return getting back James Stark because he needed a running back. So he's going to go now with Marshawn Lynch and James Starks this week. And he's got also Michael Floyd. I didn't feel like
who
it was
are
that
his
bad.
other receivers now?
Who are his receivers on his team? Let me look at it.
because that's gonna be the ultimate determinant.
Marshall, Diggs, and on his bench he's got Lockett from Seattle.
It's probably harmless, and he definitely got the better of that trade because I think James Starks, he's definitely a must start this week. He's going up against the Lions. He was recently declared the number 1 running back.
Should we have a look at him a little bit funny?
Yeah,
does it deserve a little bit of a funny tweet like, hey man, I caught on to that shady trade you made?
No, it doesn't deserve a shady tweet. And if you do tweet out anything, Adam, I don't endorse that because I'm sure it's harmless enough. And yeah, she's 1-8. Martavis Bryant is a pretty solid player, but the value is clearly slanted towards Adam. But I'm not going to complain, and you really shouldn't be vetoing something. So I know, I'm in a league. In my main league, I have my brother, so I know whenever we've traded before, and it's usually pretty harmless. And really, the main reason that we will trade with each other is because we talk so frequently. So it's easy to, hey, who do you like on my team? What do you need? Because I want this guy on your team. And that's how a lot of trades go. And I think that's what Chris does. He was on the first couple episodes, and he's really the kind of the glue in the whole league. He knows everybody, and I think that's why he makes so many trades. He's in contact with everybody. So, I may not talk to other guys as much, but he's in their ear. He's like, hey, I can make a deal. And he was in a lot of these. He was in some of these trades. We had 6 big trades in the past 2 days, and it started with Chris. He traded away Blake Bortles, AJ Green, and Dexter McCluster, and in return he got Aaron Rodgers and Daniel Herron. So essentially, it was Bortles and Green for Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, that seems fair to me. Yeah,
big players. Mm-hmm. Next trade involved my brother, and he traded with another guy in our league. He traded away Russell Wilson, Jeremy Maclin, and Teddy Bridgewater. This is a 2-quarterback league, by the way. And he received back Cam Newton, Demaryius Thomas, and the Lions D, which the Lions D is a throwaway. But you get Cam Newton and Demaryius Thomas, those are 2 solid. And when I saw that trade immediately, I texted him. I said hashtag fleeced because he made out in that deal. Another trade, Chris's brother traded away to Marco Murray, Tevin Coleman, Andrew Luck, who is now out for a month, but he also traded on Matt Hasselbeck for James Starks, Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Lacy, and Ben Roethlisberger. So again, it's a little lopsided there. That one's a little more lopsided because it's essentially for DeMarco Murray and Matt Hasselbeck. For you're getting James Starks, Alshon Jeffrey, and Ben Roethlisberger. I know Roethlisberger's out for a little while, but he's going to be back and he's going to be good. And I'm not sure what Eddie Lacy's going to be. I mean, what do you think? James Starks is now the clear starter. And I know Eddie Lacy is dealing with I think a groin injury right now. Do you think they may just kind of hold him back right now and let James Starks run wild? Because he's definitely going to have that ability to do that this week.
Yeah, no, he's earned the spot. I mean, James Starks is a guy that knows the system. He's been there a while. And when he's gotten in there, he's one of those guys that you look to when you put him in to say, hey, he can do some damage. And what a week. Of course, when Lacy's now going to take a secondary role, Lacy's going to go up against the Detroit Lions. Coming off of 2 losses, they're going to try to be a little bit more balanced a little bit and give James Starks the ball, knowing that the Lions on defense are a little bit iffy. But he's earned it. He's a true dual threat. And what you like about James Starks is not only is he a threat on the ground, but if the play breaks down, Aaron Rodgers can just look to him and he can get some yards after the catch. And, last year was a little bit tough. I remember having him in that, Lacy was getting most of the touches and he would break off. He is one of those guys that if you put him on your bench, he could go off for 25. But this year, now, going forward, I like the fact that he's the number 1 guy and he looks to continue this run.
Yeah, so after that, another trade involved the same guy who just traded away all those great players. And he traded away even more. He traded away Eric Decker, Josh McCown, who's not a starter, but he's, every week it's back and forth. He could be the starter next week. And Tevin Coleman, who he just got. And in return got Willie Snead, Phillip Rivers, and Niall Davis. So, I mean, Phillip Rivers it's a solid, he's getting back a solid quarterback. Another trade. Man, there's so many players being traded here. Corey again in on a trade. and he trades away Pierre Garçon and Michael Crabtree for AJ Green. So, I mean, I'm not sure about that. I would have kept Michael Crabtree over AJ Green right now because I think he's got
After that hard game last week, yeah.
He's got an upside right now, and he's been pretty solid all year. AJ Green definitely has a tendency to fall off. And last trade so far, again, involved my brother. He was able to get rid of the Lions D, traded away Tavon Austin and the Lions D for Sammy Watkins and Kirk Cousins. I think that's a solid trade for him because Sammy Watkins came back. He looked healthy. He definitely has a tough matchup tonight, which going up against the Jets. I still feel that Bills offense is pretty good. And Kirk Cousins he's not a bad, in a 2-quarterback league, he's not that bad.
Okay, so now what record are you at now in your league? Where are you at? Where are you sitting?
Currently, I am 3-6.
Okay, so you got off to a rough start in the league.
Started out 1-6, and I'm on a 2-game win streak right now. And I am knocking on every single piece of wood. But I did text my brother earlier in the week, and I said, I feel like my team is looking up. I made a couple trades earlier. Actually, I made one trade, but it was big because my entire season was wrapped around Andrew Luck, and he failed me. And I was able to package him away and Calvin Johnson, and I got back Drew Brees, who's been pretty solid for me, and Julio Jones. So it's really kind of turned around my season, and especially some injuries on other teams has helped me out. So my starting lineup right now, I'm starting Carson Palmer and Drew Brees, who right now they're both top 10 quarterbacks. Jeremy Hill, I'm still rolling with him, unfortunately. If I had any better option, I would probably put him in there. And then I have D'Angelo Williams. I drafted him for the purpose of trade bait, and he sat on my bench for the longest time. And I was at that point where I was like, do you want to drop D'Angelo Williams or not? And, I mean, it sucks for Le'Veon Bell, but it's really helping me in fantasy right now, especially last week.
So do you have a history in the past of reshaping a team like this? I mean, wow. You really, in looking at what you've told us, wow, you got rid of Luck, and now he got hurt. He's had an up and down year. He hasn't been the same guy this year. In terms of fantasy numbers, he's been basically a bust. And, in my league, the same thing. I had Andrew Luck, and I was waiting, and with him, he's been starting off slow. So when you're waiting, and then at the end of the game, he gets that 20, 25 points, you're like, oh, okay, fine, he got it. But then he's thrown a little bit more picks, and so that led me to pick up Blake Bortles. And Blake Bortles, at the time, when I asked, hey, is he a top 15 quarterback? And it wasn't because of talent. It was because you felt like, okay, maybe Jacksonville will be out of games and they'd have to pass the ball a lot. But Blake Bortles has steadily this year become a top 10 fantasy guy and a guy that you can rely upon. But you've done a really good job. And wow, I give you credit. You basically reshaped a bad team and turned it into a good one.
I reshaped it, but I didn't really do a whole lot. I mean, aside from the main trade where I traded away Luck and Calvin for Breeze and Julio, it's more of a, I got lucky on that.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Breeze is definitely came on in the past couple of weeks. In the first couple of weeks, he's, he has a game. He doesn't play a game. He's throwing interceptions. Not really. He's throwing 1 touchdowns, and then finally he starts producing. He has the 7 touchdown game. He has 3 touchdowns. Last week, and it's really looking up. Unfortunately, my running back situation is a little still rough. I have D'Angelo Williams and Jeremy Hill, Melvin Gordon on my bench, Andre Ellington, Joik Bell, Theo Riddick. I did pick up David Cobb, so that's a guy that I'm looking to pick up. And you should. It's a little bit early for our free agent pickups, but David Cobb is a guy that you want to look at to pick up if you're looking for running back help. Tennessee running back.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever done something like this before? Like, do you in your leagues in the past reshape and tinker a lot in trades? I don't recall ever talking to you about how you reshape your teams.
I have said that I have tried pretty much everything. I've tried trading away everything. I've tried sticking with my team. I've tried reshaping it in free agency, and really, I just.
You just want to win this league bad. You really want to win this league. I can tell.
What I think is that I'm in a position right now to kind of go on a run. That 1-6, there's really nothing I could do, and it was. I don't think it was because obviously it was because my team was bad, but I drafted good players. They just didn't produce. Like Jeremy Hill, Calvin Johnson, Andrew Luck. And it wasn't where I was making wrong decisions going into the season. It was just that it just wasn't working. And I think finally now things are clicking.
So this first year being on air on the radio, talking about fantasy football and looking at it further, you think it's helped you now with this league, particularly in this Slackjaw League?
What I will say is that I found leading up to this year is I would consistently be missing out on a player. Like I would always have somebody on my bench who would, kind of blow up or do better than one of my other players. And that's what I found in pretty much all 5 of my leagues. I'm not sitting players who are blowing up and just, having a ton of points on my bench. And, I'm not undefeated in all my leagues, but I think right now, aside from the Beat the Boss League, I'm right around 500.
That's not too bad. This league, I know with your family, you've done a long time, and it sucks because I know you're a competitive guy. You want to compete. So this week, who are you going up against, and what are the projections so far?
This week, I am going up against another guy named Jason, and he made a couple trades, so I'm looking at the preview right now. So currently on his roster, he has Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Chris Johnson, DeMarco Murray, Stephon Diggs, Nate Washington, Travis Kelce, Amari Cooper, Rams, and Graham Gano. I mean, going up against my guys, I think my guys have just as good of a chance. I think right now, and because our scoring is so much different than everybody else, I am right now projected to lose by 4.
See, that's what makes now fantasy football very interesting, is the ebb and flow of keeping players. You look at a guy like Sammy Watkins. This year has been up and down for him. Some people had decided that, it's time to get rid of him, try to move him along and try to upgrade their team. But then in the end, Tyrod Taylor comes back from injury and Sammy Watkins puts up numbers. And so this year has been such a fascinating year in terms of watching fantasy football because of all the injuries. I mean, you start off with D'Angelo Williams. He starts out great for 2 games. Then Le'Veon Bell comes back, and now he's relegated. And now Le'Veon Bell gets hurt. He's one of the players that has succumbed to injuries like so many this year. And if you held on, if you got lucky, and you didn't make a move or do something with D'Angelo Williams, now you get the benefit of sitting him and keeping him on your bench, being patient. Now he comes back in his first game back in a game that he spelled Le'Veon Bell, he blows up. And my wife was a perfect example. She did the same thing. She dropped him. He was sitting on waivers, and she picked him up because she had the number 1 spot, and because her record wasn't that good, but she picked him up. And now she reaps the rewards. So this year's been fun to watch because it hasn't kind of gone to form where the guys you expect to do well are really doing well. It's ebbing and flowing. And it's made it really fun, and it's kept my interest for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think my brother made some pretty solid moves. He has 1 more win than me, but his roster right now, I look at this roster, and he's got Cam Newton and Kirk Cousins, which I think right now he's the 20th rated quarterback, so at least he's been putting up some numbers. Charkandrick West, who coming off a bye, I think it's only going to help him. Todd Gurley, Allen Robinson, Demaryius Thomas, Tyler Eifert, Devontae Adams, who I think he's going to be targeted heavily this weekend. I think all the Green Bay receivers are going to be targeted heavily this weekend. So, and he also has Sammy Watkins, Martavis Bryant, and Danny Woodhead on a bye, and as well as Frank Gore. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. It's like this league, it always goes down to the last week. It's crazy. And
so who's sitting in first place right now?
Right now, Pat is sitting in first place.
Pat, what's he got going on?
He's a guy. He always, pretty much every year, he has a solid team, and I want to say that he hasn't won a championship yet either. So I got that going for me. But he also does use a computer to draft his team.
Okay.
He buys the software, and he puts in all the numbers, and it tells him who to take, and we rip on him every single time. So I'm looking at his roster, and it's disgusting, I have to say. He has top 10 players for his entire starting lineup. If he had Devontae Freeman, if he wasn't on bye, then yeah, he'd have top 10 players for his entire starting lineup. That's geez. I didn't even realize this.
See?
He's got Andy Dalton, Derek Carr, Lamar Miller, Devonta Freeman. He's starting Latavius Murray this week, who is no slouch. Odell Beckham, Eric Decker. He's got John Brown.
Oh my God!
Greg Olson at tight end. He's also got Gary Barnidge.
How did you allow this guy to get stacked like this? Wow.
Dude, it's a computer, and I'm gonna continue. It's and whatever if he does win a championship, there's gonna be an asterisk next to it.
All right, I got a question for you. Now, have you been in leagues where a husband and wife have been, in the same league? In our league with Adam and I, we've had a couple issues before because our teams don't trade a whole lot. So then what ends up happening is when the rosters, when our records kind of get bad and one team's maybe 3-5, 3-6, then, the couples have been known as a trend to kind of trade with each other. And I kind of kicked it off with, sparking a heated debate. And one day I'll pull it up and we'll review it. But I basically traded away D'Angelo Williams and got not a lot in return. And I traded D'Angelo Williams to my wife. And I had to use the justification that he comes on late and things like that. But it was a little bit shady. It was suspect. But it got people, got Adam, put him in a tough spot, knowing that he's in the league too with his wife. His mom and dad are in the same league. So what are your thoughts on couples and leagues and trading with each other? Because he made a trade that you could maybe go, I think he might have looked at her roster and said, hey, what can I pilfer and take from her to help my team, knowing that his wife is out of the league, out of the contention to win.
My opinion is you just have to trust that they have the best interest and that they're not cheating, because I think it's really, especially with the trade that you told me about between Adam and his wife, it isn't that bad, and it clearly is in favor of Adam, but not seeing her entire roster, I mean, maybe this does help her out.
She's 1-8. How much more help is she going to need?
But because you're 1-8 doesn't mean you can't still play to win.
Yeah.
It's like the Lions. I mean, people just want them to lose out so they get the one of the top picks. You should still be competing to win. You shouldn't just be giving up. This isn't the NBA. You shouldn't run your team like the Philadelphia 76ers where you're just giving up and laying down for people. That's not how I play. And if I was in a league like that where teams were clearly colluding and saying, hey, you're 1-8, I'm at the top of the league, give me your best players, that's not cool.
Okay. Has your wife, now that you spend some time watching football, you're on the air on Detroit Sports 105.1, doing a fantasy football show with Dennis Farrell, does she have an itch to play, or does she ever say, hey, my wife, the story with us was she knew I was a sports fanatic, not just football, basketball, baseball. So I would watch, and she's like, I can't watch football anymore. You're watching this all day. Why do you do this? Once she got into fantasy football, now if there's nothing going on, she's flipping through, getting that 4:00 game, looking at her team, and I'm like, this is great. It actually helped. It helped us out on Sunday. She's watching football. She's loving it. She's into it, and she gets mad when one of her players does great on the bench, and her record, sucks this year. So she's got a little evil eye towards you. But I tell her, Jason's a good guy. Relax. You don't have to call us up. He's a good guy. He just, was unprepared. I just called him up an hour beforehand. She's like, this guy's on the air. Why does my team suck? I'm like, sorry, honey.
Yeah, whatever. But anyways,
does she have an itch? Does she
my wife, she's always liked sports, and she's watched it with me. She likes, and I think she's really kind of grown to like football. Obviously, it does get to a point where there's too much football, and even for me, there's a point where I don't really want to sit around for 12 hours and just watch football. I kind of want to do something with the rest of my life. But, when I started doing the fantasy show, she would listen and she still does listen every week. And leading up to in the preseason, she was like, she's listening. She's like, I'm really getting this stuff. And like, I think if there would have been a little bit more time and there would have been a league, there would have been a spot open in a league, I think she would have totally done one league. She has done one in the past, and this is before, me being on radio or podcast. And, she kind of quit halfway through that season.
She's just got to let it go.
That's kind
of suspect. You can't do that.
It's not suspect.
Well, isn't there a competitive balance if she just doesn't set a lineup or
I made
lets
sure,
the buys go?
To set her lineup every week.
See, there you go.
But I think now, though, she would totally do a fantasy league.
Now you bring up a point of why I kind of asked. Okay, so then you're kind of, the others in the league where there's couples may say, well, okay, the woman might not be as in the know about fantasy football. So the kind of perception might be, well, basically the guy's running two teams.
Well,
so you
why
got a
don't-
double edge. You got a competitive advantage because you are paying, the entry fee, but you basically got two teams and you can kind of trade with each other and kind of do some things that can affect the competitive balance of the league because you're basically running two teams.
Well, that's where the whole gentleman's league with our league. You just gotta trust that they're not doing that, and you're gonna see if there's clearly collusion happening because this trade it really isn't that bad, but obviously if collusion is happening, stomp it out.
So has there been any female champions in the Slackjaw League
We don't have any females.
ever?
No.
Oh, we have a violation. You
We
are
don't have
gender
any
biased.
violation.
You are gender biased in the Slackjaw League.
We're not gender biased. It's just
So if a woman
never came up.
no females have ever won. No significant others of the guys. Nobody wanted to join the league, huh?
Nope. We used to have a tradition where we would have a slackjaw wives or widows dinner the night before draft, where we'd go out and to a nice dinner with our wives, and then the next day we had draft. I know sometimes that they would actually, I think they went to Frankenmuth a couple times on draft day because we're doing our thing. They get to do their thing.
See, so Mrs. Jarvie, if you're listening, I know Jason's here doing the podcast. Get in on that league and win it before he does.
I think she would. There was my nephew. He started a league. I think if there would have been a spot open, I think she totally would have jumped at that league.
Gotcha. All right, so what has been some news and notes that have caught your attention? Obviously, the injuries. Anything at all that's caught your attention this week in the world of fantasy football?
Tons of news. And I think the biggest thing is that there's continuing to be just season-ending injuries. And I think one of the biggest news breakers this week was Andrew Luck. You find out that he has a lacerated kidney and a partial abdominal tear. Oof. And this is the injury that essentially...
Did you see that hit?
I did, and it's crazy, though. And it's crazy that he might even be back this year. This is an injury that put Keenan Allen out for the rest of the season. And they were saying 2 to 6 weeks. I can't even imagine coming back in 2 weeks. That would be crazy. So, Andrew Luck, he's probably out until at least December. You're probably going to see him mid-December. If you're looking for a quarterback, Matt Hasselbeck isn't that bad of an option. He's probably going to keep the team afloat. I think they have the talent there, and Hasselbeck, he's a game manager. He's not going to be stellar for you, but I think you can count on anywhere between 180 to 250 yards and 1 to 3 touchdowns. You
know what the biggest news last week was to me? And again, it frustrates me because I have a player that I need to be productive. I haven't seen a situation where a guy is so dependent on his quarterback than in Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown blew up with Ben Roethlisberger. Numbers that are luscious. I'm talking about what, 248-ish yards? I'm talking about, wow, no scores, but a ton of yards. And then Big Ben goes down. And then, you start to think, oh, God, here we go. Is Martavis Bryant now going to get all the touches now that Landry's going to be back in there? I'm like, you know what? The first go-around when Big Ben was out, I had called into the show and said, listen, how terrible is that Antonio Brown, a talented wide receiver, was relegated to a flex position in fantasy? This is a guy that can get you 20 to 30 fantasy points a week in non-PPR. And now, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen now this go around with Antonio Brown? What's his stock going? What's his stock at right now?
I don't think Antonio Brown has been that bad though. I'm just looking at my Slackjaw league. He's still the number 2 receiver right now behind Julio Jones.
No, because there's some outlier performances, but in the time when Big Ben was gone, he got targeted less than 5 times back-to-back weeks. So, but when Big Ben came back, he puts up numbers like, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns.
I guess, for this week, because I think for Ben Roethlisberger, I think he was limited at practice. I know a lot of the team personnel are saying that he has a pretty good shot of playing. I'm not sure if Ben is sure of that, and it's really going to be a game time decision. If he does play, it's Antonio Brown's probably going to have a pretty solid week because they're playing Cleveland. I'm not sure if it's the same type of numbers you're going to see as last week, but if Roethlisberger's playing, you can almost guarantee 9 to 10 receptions at the minimum, 100 yards and a touchdown. If not, you want to hope that Landry Jones can find Antonio Brown, but they may just rely on D'Angelo Williams because he's been a workhorse so far. Some more news, going forward. Like I said, D'Angelo Williams. So he had a inflamed foot, I think, is what they said. But he did practice in full today, so he's all solid. I think he's going to be good to go. But the guy that they are talking about, if he can't go, is Jordan Todman. And, he's been taking reps with the first. I'm not sure if you pick him up, I'm not sure if he's start worthy. But if if you're in the situation where you have D'Angelo Williams, you probably want to look at picking this guy up just as a handcuff going forward. Because I think D'Angelo Williams is one of those characters who, at some point, he's going to get hurt, kind of like Darren McFadden.
And the other news and notes that I picked up on is that, I've kind of honed in on the quarterback position because of my struggles with Andrew Luck, and I want to tinker. I'm like, okay, is Blake Bortles the best option? Do I want to roll the dice and keep him? And the emergence of Tyrod Taylor and Derek Carr this year have been very pleasant to see fantasy-wise. Derek Carr is now on point now with Blake Bortles, getting around 20 to 25 points on average, established himself now as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And Tyrod Taylor, you see the difference in that Buffalo offense when he's in there and when he's not. Sammy Watkins has emerged. And so going forward, if you got Tyrod Taylor or Derek Carr, you're sitting pretty. And I'm like, wow. It's nice to see because I've kind of tinkered around, and I have a combination of those three guys, Bortles, Carr, and Tyrod Taylor in 3 leagues. So I'm sitting pretty at the quarterback position. I'm very happy.
Some other big injury news out there. Matt Forte, this is the big story last week too, because Jeremy Langford came in. He fulfilled all the duties pretty well. And Forte, he was limited at practice. You're going to want to keep an eye on him. Look at the injury report that comes out tomorrow, and he may even be a game-time decision. If he does play, I'm not sure what you're going to get out of him because I think they liked what they saw from Langford, and I really think you may actually see Forte not on the Bears next year because they have confidence in Jeremy Langford.
Yeah, and we know him well here that he was a Spartan.
I mean, how awesome is it that all these Sparty running backs are doing awesome?
It's nice.
I wish Javon Ringer would have succeeded.
What happened to him?
He went to the Titans and then he did nothing.
Flamed out, right?
I think he had one good game and then zero. All you Dallas Cowboy fans, Dez was limited in practice, but he is probably good to go. He did have an outburst recently with the media where he was a little ticked off. If you want, you can look it up online. But his counterpart Tony Romo, he's participating in drills and probably looking to be back next week.
Oh, that'll help me. I got Des Bryant, for Marshawn Lynch, and so I'm riding him out. So I need Des Bryant to have a great second half. And, he has started to develop a little bit of rapport with Castle. It's nice to see. But Dallas, that's an interesting situation with that franchise. Once Romo went down, their season went to the tank.
And Romo and Bryant, they're a scary combination. When they're on, Des Bryant could amass 10 touchdowns in the last couple of games that he has with Tony Romo. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw, multiple 2-touchdown games. Mm-hmm. So it's great for anybody who's held on to Tony Romo. I know I dropped him in a league, but I think I had Carson Palmer, so I'm pretty solid at the quarterback. Other big news, Emmanuel Sanders for the Broncos. He hasn't practiced. It looks like he's going to play, but I think he might be a game-time decision. Latavius Murray, he's coming off a concussion. He says he's symptom-free, but you're going to have to wait and see. And there's really 3 running backs behind him that you're going to want to look at. There's Marcel Reese, there's Roy Halou, and Tywan Jones. And I think the 2 you really want to look at are Marcel Reese and Tywan Jones. So I don't really think that they trust Halou enough. And if I had to pick between the 2, I'm probably going Marcel Reese because I think he gives you a better chance of scoring a touchdown. Tywan Jones might be the more of an every down back, but Marcel Reese is probably going to get you the touchdown. Injury news: Victor Cruz. He's been he's been injured all season, and I'm not convinced that he's actually going to come back this season. Right now the plan is to come back after next week's bye. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of setback in that time, and then he goes on season-ending injured reserve.
How disappointing are you with that, with his performance this year?
I mean, I guess if you're a Giants fan, you can't be too sad because Odell Beckham is clearly, he's the number one there. But if you had a Victor Cruz in his prime and then you had Odell Beckham, I think that team would be almost unstoppable. I mean, with a Shane Vereen, as another backfield threat, Eli Manning could be putting up, 300, 400-yard games every day.
Yeah, I got lucky. I picked up Vereen, and he did solid for me. I picked him up he was on the waiver wire in our league. So, the Giants, fantasy-wise, a little bit inconsistent. I had tight end Donnell, and he hasn't done much. He last year, there were several games that he got some solid production. But this year, the Giants, fantasy-wise, are a team that you just kind of look at with their players and go, just pass. Look elsewhere.
Yeah, so let's. We're gonna jump over to some free agent people that hopefully they're not scooped up, but if you are looking for some help, I'm here to give it to you. Both of the New England running backs, James White and Brandon Bolden, I think both of them really should be rostered. With Deion Lewis out, I think Bill Belichick, he really doesn't care what running back is producing as long as they're producing. So I think James White probably has the inside edge right now, but look for Bolden at some point in the rest of the season to have a breakout game. It's just figuring out when Bolden is going to have that, and if you're lucky enough to start him there. Dontrell Inman, the San Diego wide receiver, obviously the Chargers, they lost Keenan Allen a couple of weeks ago with the lacerated kidney for the week, and Malcolm Floyd just tore his shoulder labrum last week, so they're going on a bye. And Stevie Johnson was the clear. I think last week I told you Stevie Johnson and Malcolm Floyd were two really big pickups, and they really should have been rostered because they're the number one, number two receiver. And apparently Floyd is saying that he might try and play through this injury, which I don't see how he can do it. Even if he does, it's going to be limited. And I think Dontrell Inman is a good option. I know he's had one pretty big game, so he's kind of a sleeper, more of a deeper pick, and you might want to try and pick him up. Dorial Green-Beckham is another guy. He's starting to come on in Tennessee. Last week he had 10 targets, had 5 catches for 77 yards. And, if Mariota, if he's just getting better and better, I think Green-Beckham could be his go-to receiver in the future.
Is your upside on Mariota high now that the changes have been made? Again, Wisenhunt was fired. Mariota had a little bit of dip, and, his season has kind of gone up and down his rookie year, as you would expect. But the second half of the year, what do you think for Mariota?
I kind of still see an up and down because as a rookie, unless you're, the second coming of
Peyton
Manning, yeah, which he didn't have a good rookie season either. You're going to have a tough time. You're getting used to this league. So I still see Mariota, being up and down, but I think
matchup based, maybe keep him on your bench.
He's going to be trending upward.
Okay.
And also, I mentioned Corey Brown earlier that I picked up last week. He worked out for me. I still think he's a pretty solid play because it looks like Cam Newton is spreading the ball, and they're just finding ways to win. Devin Funchess had a touchdown last week, so I think he might even be a guy. If you're looking for some wide receiver depth, maybe put Funchess on your bench. And the last guy that I'm looking at, I have a hard time with, and it's Wes Welker. Just signed by St. Louis this week. He really shouldn't be playing.
He wasn't in because he had a lot of concussions and no one took a flyer on him. And I agree with you. I think that, I don't know if he needs the money. I don't know if he just can't let it go. But a guy like that, I hope nothing serious happens to him because he's just one hit away from something serious. And you don't want to, think about it, but what's going to happen now in his career? What's going to happen to him after his career's over?
And that's a question I have for you is, as a doctor, as a psychologist, and you've spoken on it before on the whole CTE issue. This is a player who has multiple concussions. He was on the free agent, he was on the free agency forever because I don't think people want to really take that risk. Should he be doing this?
It's, repeated concussions. Once you have them, put you at risk for, to get another concussion very easily. So he's at risk. He's playing a tough position. He's undersized. So exactly. All the signs point to him maybe just hanging it up. But it's super tough, man. And like I've talked about before, you get so wrapped up in your identity as a football player that, and you don't ever want to leave the game when it's not on your own terms. You know what I'm saying? You know, you don't want to feel like that you got injured or that you weren't able to kind of rise to the occasion. And I think this go around, though, if he does get hurt, he'll wrap it up. He'll say that I gave my best effort, and he'll walk away. But you just and the part that you got to think about is football players have to have a certain mentality anyway to be like a warrior, to play that kind of sport. So I don't think it takes much for him to get back on the field. He's not scared. And a lot of people you'd ask, and you could pose this question philosophically, if you ask someone, hey, you'll be 50 years old, you'll be decrepit, but you'll have $25 million in the bank for your family, you'll get well over 70% of people that say, you know what, I'll take that. You will have some that say never, but you will have people that say, you know what, for the trade-off to secure the money with my family, to play football, to live my dream, I'd do it.
That's possible.
That's what it is.
You know, is it just me, or do I would feel a little dirty having him on my team.
I wouldn't. Not at all. I'm going to look right now, actually, to pick him up. Hey, man, if he gets you that, he's a guy that can still, when he plays well, he'll get you those yards after the catch, and I can't wait to see his first game. Maybe you wait one game to see how he does, if he survives. But hey, he's worth a waiver wire pickup.
It's just
there's no feeling in fantasy football, Jason. What are you talking about here?
You gotta have a little feeling somewhere. When I was looking,
it's money, baby.
I was looking up, what they were saying about Wes Welker, and I don't see anything in there about this. This guy is in real danger. He has multiple concussions. The bio that they
where's the NFL saying, hey, stop it?
What they say is, he's injury prone, but if he could be, he has some really wide receiver depth, and he could be a very good PPR machine. It's like, it's just, I feel like that's kind of crazy that's how we look at these people.
Yeah, well, we were talking about earlier.
That's crazy. I'm trying to put some feeling in.
Yeah,
here.
Golden Tate. A lot of people will say that. Fantasy football has made the relationship between fan and player skewed way to the other side, where people don't even care about asking a player how they're doing. They get messages and emails and tweets and texts saying, "Man, you cost me a fantasy game, man. Pick it up." And they're like, "What? I don't even think about that." But that's just the way it is right now. A lot of people are detached because of the money and the way these players act, the domestic violence issues repeated, and so a lot of people are just like, you know what? Let me just compete and play fantasy football, and that'll be my outlet.
All right, I'm going to give you my starts and sits of the week. I got 2 each for quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. I'll start with quarterback. Starting this week, you got to go Derek Carr. He's been solid this entire season. And going up against Minnesota, I think he's going to continue his previous production from the week before and still put up crazy numbers. And my other starting quarterback that I'm going to give you is Kirk Cousins. Going up against New Orleans, he's got Deshaun Jackson back. I like what Matt Jones is doing. I think Matt Jones might have a solid game too. But I think Kirk Cousins, if you're looking for some quarterback help, Kirk Cousins is the guy to start. For sits, this top guy that I'm going to say, you probably can't sit him, but he has a really bad matchup, and that's Carson Palmer. He's going at Seattle. Arizona has been pretty awesome this year, but I think Seattle trying to get back on the bus, it's gonna be tough sledding in Seattle. And my other sit at quarterback, Jay Cutler. He hates you, and we hate you, Jay Cutler. Going up against St. Louis in that god awful dome that they have there. Jay Cutler is not going to do good. I think Eddie Royal is still questionable. Not sure if he's going to be available at all. We saw last week, Marcus Wilson. I thought he might have been a solid play, but he did nothing last week. So I think it's going to be more of a Jeremy Langford show, and that'll lead me into my starts for running backs. Jeremy Langford is one of those guys, and he does have a tough matchup at St. Louis. But I think because Jay Cutler is going to be so inept and have so many issues, I think St. Louis might actually dare them to run the ball. So I see Jeremy Langford having a pretty good game. And my other start this week is a complete no-brainer. James Starks at home.
Ding, ding, ding.
Going up against Detroit. It's going to be a slaughter. I think this game is going to be bad. It's going to be over by the second quarter. I wouldn't even be surprised if we saw Scott Tolzien at some point this week. But James Starks, he's a solid start this week. For running backs, Antonio Andrews, running back for the Titans, going up against Carolina. They're at home, but I think they're kind of transitioning more towards the passing game with Marcus Mariota. And David Cobb, their rookie running back, just came off IR, And I think they're really going to start to try use him more. And I see David Cobb, he might get some goal line carries where that's going to hurt your value for Antonio Andrews. And my other sit at running back is James White, the New England running back, the guy who's apparently going to be taking over for Dion Lewis. This is a game where I see Brady's going to go up big. He's going to pass it to Edelman. He's going to pass it to Gronkowski. He's going to get it to even Amendola. And I think then they're just going to hand the ball off to LeGarrette Blount. It's going to be the Blount show again. And James White, he might have, 4 or 5 catches. I just don't see the same kind of production that Dion Lewis gave you. Going to receivers, one, Kamar Aiken, Baltimore wide receiver. I think he's slowly becoming a star in this league. He's proven that he can be a big time receiver, and going up against Jacksonville, I think Joe Flacco is going to try and target him because that game might turn out to be a shootout with the way Bortles playing as well. And my other start, again, any Green Bay wide receiver. You can start
Pick one.
Randall Cobb. You can start Devontae Adams. You can start James Jones. I really couldn't decide between which one is going to be good because I feel like my prediction is Randall Cobb probably goes for like 4 or 5 receptions, with one of those being a long touchdown. Devontae Adams seemed like Aaron Rodgers was just targeting him a ton last week. And I think he's going to find him again, and he's going to get yards. So I see Devontae Adams getting around 8 or 9 catches, probably 100 to 120 yards, maybe a touchdown.
Jason,
maybe not a touchdown.
Jason, the fantasy gods might be in play here. You know who's now the new general manager of the Lions, who was a former player, who was there in 1991 when the Lions last beat Green Bay?
Sheldon White.
Sheldon White.
I don't care.
He came out with a press conference today, Thursday, and said, hey, we're grinding. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to try to earn that job. Hey, you think the players will play for Sheldon White and play great and actually turn this around? I mean, everyone. What percentage chance you get? What percentage chance you give the Lions of winning? Everyone's saying they can't win. It actually makes for a fairy tale story. The terrible Lions go in with their new embattled interim general manager and go into Green Bay and make it like a 10-7 game and muck it all up and win the game.
I give you a 0.0 chance of the Lions winning.
The Doc and Jock, we gave it 7%, but okay.
To end that, I would say James Jones. He's probably going to get
You're like, forget
7
big numbers.
Catches.
Okay, big numbers.
40 yards. I would say he gets 2 touchdowns because once they get down to the red zone, Aaron Rodgers loves James Jones, and he always seems to find him.
See, I'm just used to the Lions disappointing, where everybody now and their mama was going to pick and load up on everybody on Green Bay. Like, okay, I got this. James Stark might only get 30 yards. Rodgers might have a couple turnovers. The Lions will find a way to screw you in reverse.
If I had to pick a way that game may play out, I either think it's going to be a blowout in favor of Green Bay, or I feel like that the Lions are going to come out and they're going to be good. They go up. Maybe it's like 20 or 31-14 going into half.
And then they lose, yeah.
And then,
50 straight points.
It ends up being 52-49. And it just tears our heart out. It's, oh, gosh.
Well, for what it's worth, what I can tell you, the couple guys that I just got my eyes on that I think are going to do well, not a lot, just a couple guys that I just kind of pinpointed for a couple of fun reasons. Demaryius Thomas, wide receiver from the Broncos. Kansas City, you wouldn't know it based on how the Lions played against them, but they have one of the worst secondaries in the NFL.
They do.
And Peyton Manning is going to realize that quickly and test that secondary. So look for Demaryius Thomas. I think to have a big game, and also he's got a little bit of extra motivation psychologically as well, in that his mother will be in attendance in the stadium for the first time to watch your son play.
You're always bringing that up. You keep pushing that.
I think
you're trying to push
there's
that.
a little bit of an edge. He's going to have that little extra swagger. So he's only got, he's got the most targets, but he's only got, I think, very limited touchdowns.
What I like about Demaryius Thomas is that he isn't reliant on Peyton Manning throwing him the ball far and then him going and getting it. Is that Demaryius Thomas can pretty much make his own touchdowns.
He's only got 1 this year. But look for him to have 2 or 3 in that game. Look for
his mama.
Look for it. Quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. Wide receiver, I would go with Martavis Bryant. You just go based on history. Brown's going to have a dip in his production, and I would go with Martavis Bryant taking on the Cleveland Browns. And if you're looking for a running back, Doug Martin has been up and down, but going up against that Dallas defense, I think he'll have a strong chance to have some big numbers and get back on track.
So, Doc, do you have a pick of the week? Maybe even say a lock of a player. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be some crazy unknown player who's going to break out. Who's your lock? The guy who's going to the best.
My lock. I have to pick on Vinny. The Eagles just last week gave up 299 yards and 3 scores to Matt Castle. And Matt Castle's a bum in my mind. I don't know. He's rode that nice 12-4 season from New England all the way into 3 other jobs. I'm shocked. But I look for Ryan Tannehill, who's been very disappointing this whole year, to come out versus the Eagles and do some damage. Look for him to have similar numbers in the area of 320 yards, 3 scores, and do some damage at Philadelphia. Ryan Tannehill, surprise start of the week, guaranteed. Doc.
That's interesting. My pick of the week that I'm going to have to go, he's been solid, and he's going to be solid this week. Todd Gurley, going up against Chicago at home. Over his last 5 games, he's averaging 130 yards. And you don't need to be fooled by the Chicago run defense. When you go on ESPN and you look at how the defense ranks up against running backs, it says that they're ranked 13th against the run. But let me tell you who they've been doing good against. They've succeeded against Green Bay when Eddie Lacy's having a down year. They succeeded against Oakland. They succeeded against KC when Jamal Charles went down. Detroit, which we all know what their running situation, and San Diego, which is another. They're a passing team. Whenever they played a good team with a solid run game, they've given up over 100 yards, and that is Arizona, Seattle, and Minnesota. And I think Todd Gurley is going to run all over them. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back to 150 yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns.
Okay. It's been a fun chat. It went by a little bit too fast, man. But it's going to be fun. I wish you luck in your league. I'm hoping that you have this fairy tale ending and we can talk about the guy that started terribly and came back and win that Slackjaw League, man.
Hey,
good luck.
It's been done before. I think 2 seasons ago, I think a guy started either 0-5 or 0-6, and he won out the rest of his games, won the championship. So I'm going to hope that maybe I have some sort of luck like that, but only time will tell. But that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Nerds on Detroit Sports Podcast Network, and I'll see you next week.
What's up, jerks?
Manning retired.
Sure.
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. House Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.